Dr. Darkin, the Board of Supervisors today as our guest. Me, myself, including with the entire Board of Trustees, would like to sincerely thank each of you for joining us today. I'm hopeful that this will be another opportunity for us to learn more from each other and to grow together. I also ask that we show mutual respect to all parties in the meeting. We will be taking questions from the supervisors only today. However, this is an open meeting, it's not a public forum, so we will not be taking any questions from the public. And I hope that we can receive and answer any unanswered questions or concerns, and that the well-being of this hospital, and we work together. With that being said, we will continue with the agenda at hand. Thank you. Ms. Brazil.
Would you join me in prayer? Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day. We pray especially right now for this meeting, that your hand will be on us, that you will guide our thoughts and our actions. We pray for those who are in this hospital seeking care. We pray for your healing mercies, for the wisdom for the doctors, the nurses, and all the staff as they take care of our citizens. Forgive us when we fall short, and strengthen us for the loads that we carry. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Brazil. So I also like to welcome everyone. We've got a good crowd today. Have a lot to cover. Okay, this is the same kind of meeting that we've done the last 5 years with the Board of Supervisors, to give them an annual update. It's a little earlier this year than we normally get it, because we normally wait for the audit to be completed, but we have a draft. You'll see some slides that say draft on it, so just know that the auditors have pretty much said, you know, that those numbers are going to change. So I'm relying on those for today's presentation. I see various members in the crowd from the partnership, from the hospital's community advisory board, some physicians, and so thank you for coming. And everybody else, I'm sorry if I don't, and some employees as well, so thank you for coming. I know everyone has certainly interest in the proceedings today. This, as I said, is similar to what we've done in the past, but also, before we dive into the slides, I'd like to personally thank the hospital trustees, the medical staff, the hospital staff, and the administration team and directors, because, you know, healthcare is in a challenging time. And these guys grind it out. They've dedicated themselves to the mission of this hospital, which is to serve this community, and they come to work every day and do just that. I have always been open and transparent when I give reports about the hospital, because I think everybody knows when they read in the media, newspaper, that the entire industry has challenges, okay? And we're certainly not immune to those. But again, our mission is to serve this community with the highest quality health care we can provide. So the outline is just like what it's been in the past. We're going to show you what the fiscal year 23 audited financials look like. We're going to show what the comparison trends, or the 5-year trends, that we take from the continuing disclosure statement. We'll share with you what the current fiscal year 24 financials look like. Then we'll just kind of talk about some recent industry headlines. There's a couple other things quickly I'm going to cover. If an executive session is needed with the Board of Supervisors, we'll do that. Okay. Before I jump into the slides, I also want to just add that these slides were prepared from information from the audit and from the continuing disclosure statement, which is a document that's required because the hospital has revenue bond debt. Okay? And so these two documents are given to the county every year. Okay? So if you see a lot of detail, just know that the county's going to have the full documents in your possession as soon as the board has approved those. Okay? So moving into, like I said, it has drafted across because the auditors haven't finally released it, but this is the income statement for the fiscal year in September. You can see that our net revenue, patient service revenue, went from 63 million to 66.3 million. So roughly a $3 million increase over that period. But also want to draw your attention to what was written off for bad debts during that same period, 16 million versus 12. So despite that $4 million increase there, we still saw a net increase in net patient revenue. So 2.4 million increase from 22 to 23 in total operating revenue. We've continued to see, it's been trending for a while, salaries and benefit costs are down from last year by roughly $1.5 million. We are seeing inflation affect supplies and drug costs. You can see there an increase from 13.6 to 14.3 million. But overall, expenses are down roughly 600. So I'm doing a lot of rounding, but it's in that ballpark. So total expenses are down 600,000. So we'll jump down to the bottom because I know this was what was in the media just the other day. Last year we showed a loss of 3.3 million. There's that number. And this year for 12 months we're showing a loss of 2.3 million. Okay, last year there was a little money left over and applied from provider relief benefits, and so that expired in June of 22, so that's why you don't see that any of those funds there. Okay, so just confirming, we had a loss of 3.3, 2.3 for the fiscal year in 23. All right, these next slides. Let me back up. So right here, I have to address this real quick. You see county contributions and transfers to the county. You see these numbers are always the same. I'm always asked to answer this question, so I'm just touching on it briefly. The county does have a millage that they collect and send to the hospital. The hospital gives it back to the county, so the county uses that to pay general obligation bond funds, bond debt, that was used for the hospital's expansion. Correct? All right? Now, the hospital still has revenue bond debt that it's paying without the benefit of any millage, okay? And I'll show you that shortly. So in that continuing disclosure checklist, which the Board of Supervisors will see when we release that, is the history of that bond debt. We're not going to read that. But I'm just showing you that from 19 to 23, the hospital transferred $1,082,000 to the county, while the county contributed $182,000 to the hospital. That's all that millage money. Just passes hands. So this schedule also comes from that continuing disclosure checklist, and it's important to show you.
Before we do that, Jim, is they give us the money and we turn around and give it back to them through the course of the year.
Correct.
So it zeroes out.
Correct.
So the hospital operates without any assistance from the county fund.
That's correct.
Zero.
Operationally. Right.
Operational.
All right, this is an important slide. We've always shown it because it shows you the 5-year trend. Okay? So in 19, there was a loss of right at $900,000 for that year. And then we had a profit of $1.7 million, a profit of $4.6 million, right at $4.7 million. And then there's the 2 years I just showed you on the audited statement. Okay, 3.3 million loss, 2.3 million loss. Over that 5-year period, that net difference is $177,000 over a 5-year period. Is the net loss over that period that you see on the screen. Now this year was pre-COVID. All right, we had a loss of $900,000 in a pre-COVID year, and then as you remember, COVID really hit in March of 20. So a portion of this year was a COVID year. All of 21 was a COVID year, and most of 22 as well. Okay, 23 is kind of post-COVID. Okay, so you kind of keep that in mind as we kind of look at some of the trends. And this is the line item where we received the benefit of the CARES funds that was utilized solely for COVID purposes, okay? So that's not all CARES money, but the bulk of that is, okay? There was just a little bit left in 22 because that money expired in June of 22, all the CARES money. You can just see across, 66, 62, 65, 63, 66. So what we've been experiencing the last 2.5 years for sure are extreme fluctuations caused by COVID. I mean, prior to COVID, you saw trends of inpatient revenue going down and outpatient revenue going up. Well, during COVID, it flip-flopped. We had more inpatient revenue than we did outpatient revenue, and that was because we had inpatients with COVID and outpatients were avoiding the hospital because they were asked to avoid the hospital. And so as COVID kind of began to recede, then you started to see that trend flip-flop again, okay? So there's been a lot of variations in the utilization of the hospital. But over time, you'll see how many of them have kind of been fairly level. And for the ones that aren't level, there were other reasons, and we could get into any kind of detail about that. But some of that has to do with medical staff. Changes in medical staff drove a lot of that if it wasn't COVID driven. So let's see, expenses 71, 68, 71, 72, 71. And then there's the operating income or loss. Then you've got these non-operating income and expenses, and again there's the net. Okay? I'm going to move quickly, but if the supervisors have a question, we can come back. This is in-hospital, inpatient, outpatient utilization. You see the admissions, how there were 2,100, 2,200, 2,000, 1,800. A lot of this is due to the fact that it's post-COVID. And when I tell you there's other reasons why we've seen fluctuations in some of these figures is that we had a pulmonologist leave our community, and he was instrumental in driving a lot of the inpatient utilization, both during COVID and then once he relocated, we saw an impact to the hospital. Okay? Newborns, you see what they've trended over 5 years: 970, 970, 902, 930, 868. Days of care, 6,700 days, 77, 77 again. That's a lot of that's COVID-driven days of care because COVID patients, and you can see here the length of stay. Pre-COVID, it was at 3.2, and then you don't think that 3.2 to 3.5, 3.9 is a big swing, but it is. And so COVID was driving those higher lengths of stay, and then at pre-COVID, it's going back, it's trending back toward pre-COVID numbers, okay? Now, these next couple slides are really busy slides. I'm not going to sit here and read off every number, but because these two are in the continuing disclosure checklist document. But it does present detailed trending data, surgeries, labs, radiology, CTs, so on and so forth. And you can see, as I said, fluctuations due to COVID, due to other things. And some are fairly wild swinging, but if you average them out, they're kind of somewhat level, okay? So there's not really one in particular I wanted to focus on. It's just all of them kind of, you can see. 5 years ago, we had 4,600 surgeries versus 39, 35, 35, 32, 3,300. Lab and respiratory therapy were two departments that were severely impacted by COVID, right, utilization. So for lab, you can see how much that went from 172, and then kind of COVID drove lab procedures up. And now you kind of see where they are now, 175, 163. Radiology, for the most part, has remained level across the 5 years. CT, ultrasound, nuclear med, MRI. Okay, fact, we've done more MRIs this year than we've done in the past 4. Okay, pain's pretty flat. That's one set. This is another set of utilization figures. PT, particularly PT, respiratory is what I was talking about a minute ago. You see how that went from 47,000 treatments or visits to 63, kind of the peak of COVID, and kind of back down. Okay? So there's, like I said, the numbers tell a story, and that's why I show all these numbers. It kind of helps me jog my memory as to, kind of give you an overview of what we've seen over the last, not only the last year, but the last 5 years. All right? So these are all of those total outpatient registrations and ER visits. So you can see there's actually more outpatient registrations now than there were over the beginning of the 5-year period. And ER visits have fluctuated somewhat from 26,000 visits, 23, 22, 24, 24. And there's not been any change in the staffing of the ER for the most part. That's just the utilization of the ER. Okay? Again, I'm running through these quick, and so we can. I don't want to bore you with a bunch of numbers. The ambulance, we always have shown this in the past, so I've included that slide again this year. This year is when the hospital ambulance service served the city and the county, and then that's, in August of 18 is when the ambulance, the city portion of the ambulance was given to Pafford. So you can see how that's impacted 911 calls, 3,200 calls pre, and then they've gone 15, 13, 15, 13, 13. And as 911 calls went down, you see transfers went up because we had the capacity to service more transfer calls. Okay? And just for, I see our mid-set guys here, this particular drop in transfers, those guys came on board in August of 23. So there's really only, let's see, these numbers go from August 1 to July 31. So none of MedStat's numbers are included in this 23 number. Actually, July is the 1 month. Well, no, because the beginning is August 1. They took over July 1, so their service is not reflected in those numbers. Okay? The reason we treat those differently is because that's when that change was made in 18. So to be consistent, we've just kept that period as an 8-1 to July 31 period versus an October 1 to September 30 period. Okay? A couple of just informational slides about payer mix. You can see that over the 5 years, it too has not fluctuated a lot. Medicare, Medicaid, obviously the bigger payer that the hospital has, 57%. We're at 5 years, 57.4, so that hasn't moved a lot. Blue Cross, State of Mississippi, self-pay. 22.7% of our patients were self-pay patients. Whoops. Back up. I just wanted to touch on some employment figures for you, and not delving too deep into it, but you can see that for each year there's a full-time column and a part-time column. So 214, 180, 198, 147, 151. That's the number of full-time. But you see there's been a shift over the past 5 years of a lot of our full-time employees transferring or transitioning to part-time work. But if you look, and the totals are not on here, but if you added up the full-time, part-time buckets for each year, they would go 274, 286, 316, 294, 299. So we actually have more employees, although albeit most of them, a lot of them are part-time, but just in the totals, it's comparable across the 5 years. One of the things, despite our challenge, so while I'm on this slide, one of the things that we've been intentional about even during our hardest struggles with COVID, is not laying off staff like many have had to do around the country. And I'll show you some headlines in a minute, but I think there's some local hospitals that you may be familiar with that did have to do some of that. The other thing that a lot are doing are shutting down services, and that's another thing we have not done, is closing services. These are all the other employees. Now this adds the nursing staff to the total. So here's the totals for the 5 years as far as employment. Just to give you an idea kind of what our employment figures look like. So for the last, let's see, so 539, as I told you, we had a lot of full-time employees shift to part-time. But for the last 2 years, we've had the same total number of full-time employees, slight decrease in part-time. Contract has been fairly low numbers for a total of 728.
What is the major shift from full-time to part-time? Is that COVID related or is it?
You know, that's a good question. We've had part-time employees make a higher hourly rate because they don't get benefits. And part-time employees or PRN employees are able to be a little more flexible with their work schedule. And so because we didn't want to lose people, we allowed them to transition from full-time to part-time and hope, you know, our goal was to continue to be able to fill our work schedules even though a lot of them were part-time workers. So they did it to be a little more flexible and to get a higher rate. And, you know, we were sort of at a point where we had to see if we could make that work. This is another slide that we have in the disclosure checklist. It's just kind of where our patients come from. So you can see over the last 5 years, the percentage of our patients that come from Oxygen County. 59, 59, 59, 58.5, 58.3. So there's been a little shift, a very slight shift, 1-2%, where we're getting patients from other counties. But, you know, I've said in other presentations, I would love to see that percentage be a good bit higher than it is. Okay. Due to competition, local competition and services that we don't necessarily offer right now, I think that's why you see that number has trended or been pretty flat. Okay. So those patients that need services that we offer, they're having to go to other facilities that offer those services. But it's not as though we've lost ground. I mean, we're pretty much maintaining. And if I had the previous 10 years, you probably see those numbers didn't budget much from those periods either. Okay. So that's all the continuous disclosure. Now, a bit of good news is we want to share with you what the results of our fiscal year in the 4 months ending January 31. So before I get into some of this, let's jump to the bottom. We're showing a $5.5 million profit through 4 months compared to the same 4 months from the prior period, a loss of $650,000. That's significant. Now, I will share with you that the governor's decision to work with Medicaid to provide what's called MHAP funds is benefiting the state. The governor was able to get CMS approval for the state of Mississippi to receive $600 million in total. And those funds began to be paid out, started to be paid out at the beginning of January to hospitals. And so that period will go to June 30th. And at June 30th, there'll be a new period and a new application filed with CMS, and hopefully we'll continue to see those funds approved by CMS. As you can see, that's, and I've shared this as well, the number for us is an extra $13 million due to that MHAP payment that we're gonna get this year that we've never gotten before. And hopefully we'll continue to see that approved by CMS. Now, so the 4 months is improved by those funds, and where that is reflected is in this deductions from revenue, because an MHAP payment, MHAP stands for Mississippi Hospital Access Payment, Medicaid Hospital Access Payment. So it's a supplemental payment through Medicaid, and since it reduces our contractual Medicaid adjustment, that's why we show it as a reduction of a reduction, so double deduction deposit, right? So that's what's driving that positive. That's a positive number right there, because the write-offs went from 43.5 to 37.9, so a benefit of $5.6 million. We were pleased to report to our hospital board that if you took out the benefit of the additional MHAP payment, we were still showing about a $1.5 million profit for the first 4 months of our fiscal year without the benefit of this extra payment. And we knew good times were coming because you could just see it in the increase in utilization of the hospital. We saw more procedures, we saw more inpatients, and we just knew that that was going to show up on the income statement, and it did. So we were able to further improve the bottom line by the amount of the MHAP payment, okay? So coming back to some of the detail, you see these are the prior numbers, current year. So we actually saw an increase in inpatient revenue for the first 4 months of $1 million. Of course, outpatient went down by $500,000. Expenses are down another $600,000 over 4 months. As I shared with you, inflation costs are driving a lot of these increases, so we've seen a $600,000 increase in supplies, a net change in expenses of $187,000, and so we're showing an operating income of $4.7 million. And then with this other non-operating items, a positive $5.5 million. I'm rounding that, but so the difference from last year to this year is that number, $6 million. So that's a $6 million swing for the first 4 months. Okay? So if you take our expenses and you back out depreciation, I did a rough calculation. It takes about $181,000 a day. And I'll tell you where that number comes from, the calculation.
Say that amount one more time.
$181,000 a day. So the next slide is the balance sheet for January. And that's our cash balance, $25.8 million. Okay? So the reason I mentioned the 181, because in this industry, everybody keys in on how many days cash on hand we have. So we calculated it takes 181 days. We got $25.8 million in the balance. That calculates to 143 days cash on hand. And for industry comparisons, that's not a bad ratio to be at. Okay? We have another reason that last year's lot, we had some difficulty collecting some AR, but we've seen some improvement in collections, and that's, you can see right here by hospital AR going down. Okay? That has helped generate some cash as well. But anyway, I just want to show you that slide just to show you the cash balance. This slide is the liability side of the balance sheet, and the reason I want to share that with you is this number right here. This is the revenue bond debt that's on our books that the hospital's paying without any millage benefit. Okay? That revenue bond debt will be paid off in 2027. This debt right here was for the upgrade of the Da Vinci robot, which took place this year. But industry benchmarks, let's see, I calculated that is a debt to equity ratio of 6%. Typically in the healthcare industry, the debt to equity ratio for systems is like in the 40% range. We're at 6%. So what I'm telling you is we don't have a lot of debt. Okay? That means that our balance sheet is liquid and fairly strong. Right? So I mentioned some industry headlines a minute ago talking about just, if you keep your eye on the media and the papers and TV, you'll see these same things. Hospitals and systems cutting jobs, hospitals closing departments, razor-thin margins are the new norm, 1,129 hospitals reporting losses on patient services. We can talk a little more about this. Healthcare jobs go unfilled even as demand for care increases. Yeah, I'll cover that in the next slide. And then the other one is CEOs turn attention from recovery to growth. So, we've been looked at a little bit critically, like, y'all aren't doing anything. Well, to be honest with you, we've been in survival mode, like everybody else. And we're kind of getting to the point, like everybody else, that it's time to return our attention from surviving back to growing. What we were trying to do pre-COVID. Pre-COVID did put everything that we were trying to do on the side. Okay? And we had to navigate that, not really knowing what we were going to be dealing with. To be honest with you, I think this hospital was able to come through COVID very well, serve the community. And I've shared this with other groups. Our troubles weren't we encountered some challenges during COVID at its peak, but nothing like we saw post-COVID. Because post-COVID brought the worst staffing challenges we've dealt with. Okay? And a lot of that's due to COVID and what we went through. Burnout, workers transitioning to other retirement, other gig jobs, just a lot of movement. Okay? So again, we're not any different than what other hospitals have had to encounter and how they've had to tackle those. Now this slide I just want to share with you because these are things I get every day from a healthcare literature called Becker's. And this particular one caught my eye, hospital's 9 biggest challenges in 24. So out of the 141 executives that answered the survey, 77% of them rated labor shortage as the #1 challenge. And they got it right. They got it right. If you probably surveyed everybody in Mississippi, it would be 100% that. Okay? We understand that we need to be competitive with compensation and benefits, but you've got to have the resources to do that. With this, I think what you've seen from our most recent financial report, we're seeing some breathing rooms and we can address some of those things. 3 of those being in 3 particular areas. One is anywhere we can improve service, that's where we want to put our resources. Where we can improve efficiency and where we can continue to improve quality. Okay? That's where we want to put our resources. It's how can we improve the service of the community. So other topics I want to just touch on real quick. One is leapfrog, which is a measure of quality and safety. This was in Mississippi Today back when they issued the fall scores, and you can see that we are in the A category, so these are all color-coded. We're one of 8 hospitals out of the 40 you see that received an A. So there are only 8 hospitals in Mississippi that got an A. You can see some of the names, who we compared with. These are the B's, C's, and D's. And I also want to show you what's been the history of OCH's leapfrog score. So this shows you 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. And they do them 2 times a year, spring and fall. So there's B, A, AA, AB, BB, BA, and we've already received word that for the spring of 24, we're 99% sure we'll have an A. Don't put that in the paper yet. They might come to. Okay? And we are DNB accredited, and we had our accreditation survey back in November. I think that came the week of Thanksgiving. And again, we passed. So that's always a big hurdle each year, is to get a good survey. So we're pleased to share that with you as well. I believe that was the last slide I had. Are there any questions from the board supervisor?
No, I just thank everybody for coming. I know we started talking about this subject, and then I hear a lot of things from a lot of different people. I see some pretty scary headlines. I'm not in the business per se, but it's something I don't know if I was getting in the hospital business, I wanted to start. Some of the articles I started reading, and I was going to ask you what keeps y'all, he doesn't want to answer, some of the board members do. In the next 35 years, what are your biggest challenges you see? What keeps you up at night that you're worried about coming out from a recovery and growth standpoint? And also to mitigate that in a perfect world, what would you change to better OCH?
Well, our mission is to serve the community. How do you do that? You've got to have services. Okay? And one of our challenges has been recruiting physicians. I've never shied away from answering that as being one of our, one of the things we need to improve. I have recently hired, which I'll start back in July, but someone with physician recruiting experience who is going to assist me. Now, since the prior physician recruiter for the hospital retired, so I now have taken on those duties along with the help of this individual. And we've had some candidates. Pulmonology, I talked about losing the one pulmonologist, but pulmonology is at the top of our list, because what are we trying to do? We're trying to provide services that keep patients from being transferred out. I mean, we've got to keep everybody as local as we can. And to do that, pulmonology is the top of it. GI is another service that we want to be able to recruit and offer to the community. And then there's others that come after that, but those are the top 2. So we got to continue, and this is a continual thing. It's not you have a target and then you kind of hit the target and stop. This is continual for every hospital, is to recruit not only physicians but quality staff. You want to be able to retain them. You want to be able to pay them. But to be honest, one of the biggest problems we have is across the industry is getting paid by insurance companies. And that is a headache for most everyone. Because you can do, as a hospital, you can do everything right, and there are ways that insurance companies delay paying you or deny. In fact, if you go in, you'll see a lot of articles. One was even titled the other day, Deny, Deny, Deny. That was the title of the article. It was all about what insurance companies do to prevent payment. Because if they can prevent paying you, they get to keep it. I shared another article with a physician just this morning that came out on Beckers that gave a list of the losses actually of some major hospital systems in the U.S. compared to the provinces of major insurance carriers in the U.S. And those numbers were very far off. So,
as far as you call it Medicare, the basically the government sustainable funding that you're saying is coming through starting this year, is that something that is long-term? Where's that money derived from, and what's the long-term sustainability of it?
It's actually Medicaid.
it's a Medicaid.
It's federal. It's federal.
Yes, it's federal.
Not Medicare.
It's a Medicaid supplemental payment. And I tried to touch on that briefly earlier. I said, we thank goodness we got the governor was able to get approval for that for this year. Now that year will end. That state and federal fiscal year ends June 30th. So come July 1, another application will have to be made. And I've asked the question to many people: what's the likelihood that will continue from year to year? There's no way to read that crystal ball, but the precedent's now been set for this year, and we're hopeful that it will continue but there's no guarantee it will continue. I mean, I can't tell you.
That's fine. That percentile, I put 27 to 30%, is that considered low? Is that like, you're saying there's 96 or 97 total beds in the hospital? That was just
96 is the number of licensed beds, but if you look across, the state, you'll see hospitals that have a large number of licensed beds, but the ones that are staffed and the ones that are actually being utilized is a much lower number.
So that's high for the industry?
96?
No, 27%.
Good question.
Normal.
For a 96 bed hospital, that's probably the average.
I saw no cardiac inpatients. Does that mean that the cardiac, I'm not at medical field at all. If a cardiac patient gets here, does that mean they get shipped out every time?
If a patient presents to the ER with a cardiac issue, yes, they'll be stabilized and transferred. That's correct. Now, we do have an arrangement that with UNC, their affiliation agreement, that they do a one-day cardiology clinic, but that's an outpatient clinic. So they'll see patients in the clinic, and if they need follow-up or continued care, they will go somewhere for that.
Again, I'm not any kind of medical field. Is that something you try to stabilize and get to Jackson or Tupelo, or is that?
We have a lot of, they go every direction, really. They go every direction, but those are the three main ones. Columbus, Tupelo, and UNC.
Been asked what was the driving factor to move from Pafford to Medstat, and I've heard a lot of good things about Medstat. I'll say since they've come on board, come from an EMT paramedic-based family. A lot of individuals that grew up in the firehouse, but I would say I've heard a lot of good things about Medstat. What was the driving factor from that change in administration of the EMT service?
Mr. Carter, you know, I came to the county and had a quite interesting meeting about that topic. And there was nothing critical about making that transition. And in fact, what I tried to reinforce with the county was that the hospital was not giving away its obligation and delegated to it by the county. We own that, right? We just needed some help. Somebody whose expertise is running that ambulance service. And knowing what I knew about Medstat, they were the leading candidate for a partner. So we're really partnered with them to help provide that service, and so far it's gone very well.
Do you think joining another larger medical group would increase bed percentage numbers? We're talking about 27%, or is that just considered, or was that increasing especially provided? You know, basically I want to know, getting a higher bed percentage out of the hospital by maybe joining with another organization.
Yeah, I can't predict what another organization do with the beds that are available to them now. Obviously, we've got a third floor that I would love to be able to put people in those beds.
To not have anybody in it.
But you've got to have the demand for those beds. You've got to have the staff for those beds. And you need physicians that are putting them in those beds. So it really takes multiple parties to see that inpatient utilization increase.
The third floor doesn't have any services being provided on it?
Not right now.
Maybe not the time to ask, do you think, I mean, looking back, was maybe the hospital expansion too large for the time? Or was it?
You know, at that time, I don't think that it was. I think, though, that for many, many years, it's been the trend to keep patients out of the hospital. And hospitals have been incentivized to keep patients out of the hospital. What I mean by this is this. So, a total knee replacement made at one time, maybe some of my physicians can weigh in, would have required a 1, 2, 3 day stay. Now they go on the same day. And the reason is because CMS, the governmental payer, is driven it in that direction. So for a number of years, you've seen all inpatient utilizations going down while the outpatient utilization is going up. And that's what it means by that.
Thank you.
Sure.
And a lot of the technology that they use is what we just invested in some upgrade technologies that are performing operations a lot more efficient than they did 10 years ago. So it's pleasing to take a procedure, you go standard there for 3 years now with the surgery the way it is from robotics and all that.
And that line indebtedness, you said 6%?
Yeah, that's the debt to equity ratio, 6%, and industry average for healthcare systems is 40% range. So they're highly leveraged with debt. And so they've borrowed their way to spending on infrastructure, technology, things of that nature. That's what they borrowed for, to expand. But you see very few expanding nowadays, because like I said, the government has really forced everybody toward an outpatient model.
I might want to ask Ms. Farmer, I don't know if she's in here, but, I know David talked, we got about 498 million of assessed valuation of Cuyahoga County as a whole, and 39 million of that, for 7 or 8% of the county's debt ratio.
473, I think it is.
Is the hospital included with?
No, that's not Cuyahoga County, so.
So the hospital's in all those figures we got today from Raymond James. You on Raymond James?
Raymond James is county debt, yeah. Yes. They have their own financial report that he presented.
Yes, ma'am.
They give that to me and I will present it to the board to acknowledge. But what you have from Raymond James is Cuyahoga County.
But that doesn't include the hospital.
It would include all of our Cuyahoga County debt, sir.
Thank you.
Anything the hospital board would like to add? Any other questions from the board supervisor?
Could you just talk a little bit about, things like head trauma specialists and CONs or certificate of needs, as far as recruiting and getting specialists into the area?
Well, certificate of need has been in place for a long time. Of course, that's, so if an entity is looking to expand or offer a new service and the dollar investment exceeds X amount, then they have to make application to the state. That application is also challenged by competitors. And that seems to be the criticism of the current CON law, is that it prevents competition. And so sitting on this side of that argument from the hospital perspective, we have to provide staff and services to be on the ready 24/7 to meet the need of the community, right? I have to staff the ER 24/7 whether anybody shows up or not, right? And so what you've seen is a lot of for-profit, private equity firms, they want to be able to just pop up, put an imaging center in your community and run it 10 hours a day. But if you need something the other hours of the day, you got to go home. So we're bearing the cost of being open 24 hours a day, and they're not required to do that. Now we're required to see all comers too, no matter what your insurance is. I can't say that's exactly something that they do. So there are differences between, a competitor opening up a business and offering service that you also offer. And really that's the reason for the CON, was to make sure that it was fair. Now I understand the CON has been challenged for some time now, and I kind of see that the CON law will be changed. I don't know to what degree, but I know that there are discussions going on about that. Just as there are about Medicaid expansion. We haven't even gotten into that topic. Well, I'm looking at my notes and see if there's anything to add, unless there are any other questions. Look, I hear the buzz about staffing. Okay, we don't intentionally understaff. I mean, that's crazy to say that, we are constantly trying to find high quality staff, and that's not gonna change. That's the number one thing as well. So I agree with that slide I showed you about what the number one challenge is, it's staffing. And hopefully we're going to be able to utilize some of those extra funds and resources to try to fill some of those gaps. Okay. Look, we also, it's about service, right? I tell you, this is a relationship business and it's a service business. And now we've got some funds. I think we need a service excellence staff, right? Or department whose job is to constantly go out in the hospitals, help educate our staff on what the best practices are for serving the community, you know, and that's an ongoing thing as well. And that would be a good use of money, funds. And so that's just one example of many other ways we can try to improve what we're trying to do.
I'll say that, obviously, the market analysis we've seen, I feel like in the next 10 to 15 years, is fixing to be exponential growth in residential property, and I know aluminum dynamics, steel mill, and lots of other things coming. I think if everybody in this room invested in Occidental County, it's going to be a really good time to live here. Everything I've seen says that people come and study education and healthcare. So, as elected officials, I know we hear a lot, and we're always easily accessible 24/7. So, I would say I just want to kind of digest this. So, y'all want to have another meeting? I think we got a text today, maybe in a week or two. That's something that was discussed about it, or do y'all want to continue to know it tonight?
How y'all want to address that? We have not set a meeting. I think that the supervisors are asking for that meeting. Right. My understanding of that meeting would be that it would be primarily strategic in nature, like what the options of the hospital are, and that would probably be solely an executive session meeting.
I think the board attorneys may have communicated and decided that we'll receive the presentation tonight, have a little time to digest it,
Right.
and then reconvene a couple of weeks from now, and get into more detailed conversation, questions that can't be asked over out in the open forum like this. So it's that's sort of where we're at with that. If that's the pleasure of the board, I mean, I would, and if they want to continue, that's solely up to you, but I think that was the communication.
So I'll be glad to work with our board and the lowest, and meet with you as far as setting that meeting. If that's the wishes of both parties.
I want to do whatever to accommodate the board of supervisors, because ultimately they have jurisdiction. It's not for this property.
But if it pleases both boards, we'll just have a meeting for a couple of weeks from now.
That's fine. Yeah, that's just a lot. If I can get time to digest that and read through the numbers and things like that. And, appreciate y'all and what you do for your service. All board members here?
Yes.
Everybody? Any other hospital staff? Who's your administrative staff? You got Ms. Favor, I know.
Got Ms. Favor, Ms. Russell, CFO. Ms. Self is my assistant. I see Dr. Renshaw back window back there, Dr. Landrum, Dr. Brandon, and a number of other hospital staff right there on the front row there. It's a community advisory board members.
I'd like to say one thing, about, I'm just trying to take in everything that was said tonight, and I think everybody made a good point. But, one thing I do realize that, each individual hospital you go to in this region, is Baptist, West Point, Starkville, Louisville, and you talk to an individual about that hospital, there's always going to be some kind of negativity that's said about each individual hospital. But at the end of the day, I think that OCH is a great hospital. We may have our issues and we may have problems that we deal with on a daily basis, as Ms. Jackson said. but we are a great hospital, and we need to grow in that hospital. And, I think if we take time and sit down amongst all of us, I think we can come up with a great solution to make it better. Even with staffing, the doctors, and trying to make everything work, and get more doctors in this work. And like you said, the patient, everybody's coming here, Charlotte is growing, and we're gonna need the services that are sending everybody out. And we can use the resources here. So if we have the doctors, the specialties here, then Charlotte will grow with the additional services that we provide. So that's just my thought. Ms. Jackson.
Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service, and, I'm impressed with the leapfrog evaluation.
Yes, sir.
I did want to know whether or not that was, patient driven as an evaluation, or whether or not it was some other form of
So
evaluation.
I'll just say, you can go to the Leapfrog website, you can search any and all hospitals, and there is a link, you can drive down and see the survey information. And it is a very broad range of data across a broad range of time that they derived that score. Okay? It might take another whole day if you wanted to go into that, but I'd say, I'd just encourage you to go to the website and look at it, see if any of that stuff kind of makes sense, and if you got any questions, you're always welcome to call me. And that really goes for anybody, okay? I'm always open and willing to spend as much time as I need with anybody, my trustees, board supervisors, and answer any questions, okay?
That's a good evaluation.
Thank you. Yeah, some of the things that, I'm just kind of rambling now, but, you know, the board meets every month, and again, this board has been absolutely supportive. They've understood a lot of the tough decisions that we've had to face. They have taken their time to vet some of those difficult decisions. So some of the things that's drawn the ire of the community, I promise you there's been time and effort, participation, engagement by this board of trustees to evaluate it. And that number one question is always, what's it going to mean to serve in the community? Okay? We never want to do anything that negatively impacts service in the community. It's always about how do we improve. But sometimes you're balancing those decisions with what I started out showing you, which is what we always seem to be judged on is, what's your bottom line? Well,
This cash reserves,
25 point, see right there? So as of January 1, we had cash balance 25.8.
you got that cash balance for the last 5 years? In the fund balance?
I don't have a slide that shows that.
Has it been progressing upward or downward?
I want to say over the last 5 years, it had been fairly stable. Last, I think for 23, it had a dip down, and now it's back up.
Send that in an email. Y'all gonna send this presentation to us, to our county account?
If that is a county supervisory request.
I want
Jim, just in our discussions on cash reserve, I assume that 25, part of that's a significant injection of that in-house money, is that correct, or not? I thought we were in the
let's
upper
see.
teens just a few months ago. Just for full
About
disclosure.
5 million of that is, yeah.
Say that again?
I've asked the question that you just asked, you know, at our trustee meetings, what our cash reserve was, and it's a moving target because, you know, of assets and things like that, but it was less than 20, was my understanding just a few months ago, so that's why I was asking.
That's why I said about 5 million of that has been that
Okay.
that January.
That 13 million of in-house money that we'll get during the 12-month period.
I think the statement was that without the in-house money, we will still have 1.5 million in reserve.
positive bottom line for the 4 months.
Just the annual bottom line, we got a lot more of that in reserve. You know, but without the MHAP, it would have been something to be in reserve. 16, 18 million.
And as I shared with you earlier, all these slides, like all these, that is gonna be available in a lot more information as well. It's about a 35-page report that the county will get. All I need, the hospital will be approved at the March meeting, now that it's been updated, and, so the county will have that full report.
But Jim's point, we are training to, you know, we're over $1 million in the black so far for this fiscal year, which is kind of a new, which is good, nice.
Not so much pertaining back to Clark County Hospital, I'm just concerned with like nursing, the vacuum and nursing shortages nationwide, and COVID burnout, and with that, COVID changed a lot of markets and financial development of healthcare, but, interesting to see, I've seen some scary stuff coming out about maybe condense nursing programs and just get some numbers back up, and I know a lot of people went to the travel nurse route and were recruited as travel nurses, just still worried, but, it's interesting times, and appreciate your time talking from a recovery to a growth stage, so I appreciate it.
We certainly appreciate all that you do, all that our trustees do, our medical staff, and everybody associated with the hospital. We certainly appreciate what you do, and you know, you've never shy away from the tough questions, and we appreciate that. You know, I just think that, you know, part of our job, being elected officials, is to assess and evaluate where we are in Occidental County, not just with healthcare, education, you know, economic development, as well as healthcare. So we certainly appreciate the presentations that you always give us, and we got it. We'll take it and we'll chew on it. And when we come back in a couple of weeks, I'm sure we'll have more questions. Thank you, sir.
And that's going to be sent to the lowest.
Yes. Anything else? Ms. Brooke?
All right, if nothing else, we will take a vote to adjourn.